we're making some tough dynasty decisions tonight. We're talking about 10 wide receivers that we're buying or selling. Let's start with the first one. We're going to start with you, Jaylen Waddle. So I put on here where they fall, both on Keep Trade Cut and our ADP, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Come try it out for a week. You get ADP. We're working on ADP. We have rookie ADP and Superflex startup ADP. One quarterback is in the works. Jaylen Waddle is wide receiver 13 on Keep Trade Cut, wide receiver 14 in our ADP. So there's some parity there. I've noticed we're kind of in line on most of these players that we're going to talk about, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So, Bob, what are you doing with Jaylen Waddle?
Yeah, you'll love to see that when the ADP is at least close. It's not like wildly erratic. And that shows, hey, we might be doing something right here with the ADP and the people we got cooking in that Discord. But with Jaylen Waddle, I have been a fan for a minute now. And right now, in my opinion, he's super accessible because of the injury-ridden season that didn't take away a lot of games from him, but it did lead to him being in and out of lineups. I can attest to the, being a Waddle manager myself, plenty of those notifications coming up on game day where it's like, oh, Jaylen Waddle questionable to return with an eye injury, and then he was in and out of the blue tent with a concussion, and whatever the case is, just Jaylen Waddle, not putting up the points we're accustomed to seeing over the first 2 years of his career, averaging wide receiver 14 in points per game, but overall still a good player. Obviously a rough season last year, and Mike, I see you noted the additions of Jonnu Smith and Odell Beckham. Kind of wanting to see how these additions play out. And I'm personally not too concerned. I think they'll probably be more effective than, Jonnu Smith will probably be more effective than Durham Smythe. Yet to be seen if Odell Beckham will really be much more of a third wide receiver option. Has had issues staying healthy as himself, being in and out of lineups. He actually played a relatively full season last year. But either which way, not super concerned. Waddle is 1 year removed from a wide receiver 8 season, which was played alongside Tyreek Hill. So a lot of people there was a buy window when Tyreek Hill came to town, and everybody was like, you know what, Jaylen Waddle is going to suck. Tyreek Hill is the guy. Jaylen Waddle still balled out, and he's one of the guys that can absolutely win you a week when he's in your flex spot, your wide receiver 3 slot, and relatively accessible right now. And that's not necessarily a cheap buy. You have some prices that I didn't want to steal. I think since we're on two different sides of the fence here, we could talk about this discussion, because I'd gladly pay some of these prices, but some of the prices I would not pay. I'm very much in, though. I think Jaylen Waddle can be an absolute stud for your lineup still. So I'm very much in the buying camp here. Mike, you're not.
I'm not. And I do want to just preface this by saying, I do like Jaylen Waddle. Also, when I have values here, I typically don't put together an exact trade. You know what I mean? It's kind of hard when we don't have full teams to make a trade. So typically what I do is I'm like, look, this guy is valued around these guys. So here's kind of your graph of where you can kind of look and you can gauge from there. But I'm going to sell. And I like to sell players. It's okay to buy players low, but it's also okay to sell players high. This is one of those guys. I'm just intrigued to see how this offense looks. Jonnu Smith has been a very competent tight end in the past. This is kind of, for me, like a tear down type trade. If I think I can get a slightly younger player that's ascending. So guys like, and I don't know how this is going to pan out, maybe Rashee Rice and a 25 first in a super flex league, because I did see that trade on fantasycalc.com, by the way. Somebody made that trade about 2 days ago. This guy you could sell for like a 25 first and a second. A lot of 24 drafts already kind of over at this point, I've noticed. He's also valued around guys like Brandon Ayuk, Jonathan Taylor, if you need a running back, and an early 25 first. And in one quarterback league, Drake London, Brandon Ayuk again, and Anthony Richardson. Hey, just because it's one quarterback league, quarterbacks still matter, by the way.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I do like some of these costs. I would gladly send you Rashee Rice on a 25 first, especially if I felt myself to be a competitive team. 25 first and second, definitely in that ballpark as well. When it comes to guys like Brandon Ayuk, Jonathan Taylor, I think you're kind of splitting hairs. If you need the running back, maybe you decide with the running back. Ayuk, as much as I love Ayuk, and he's clearly talented, great route runner, but super crowded. And until he can separate himself, oddly enough, from his own teammates more than the opposing teammates, it's going to be tough to see him really break out into that wide receiver 1. I think we all believe he can be. All in all, I get it. I just don't feel super inclined to sell. And that'll be with some of these, I just don't feel super inclined to sell, or I don't feel super inclined to buy. But
I was saying to Nate on the pod the one week, I don't remember when it was. This is the time of year where I feel like you can make a case for buying and selling almost any player. So you really have to just kind of pick your poison and see what you feel most strongly about. Another guy that I feel like Nate's talked about him a bunch, but that's DJ Moore. A keep trade cut wide receiver 18, RADP. He's wide receiver 19. So again, some parity with keep trade cut there. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't like keep trade cut. I think it's important because the people that are setting these values are the people you're playing against in your fantasy league. So, it's kind of another good way to gauge how your league mates are feeling. But Bob, what are you doing? I feel like we're kind of in agreement here, a little bit, half agreement.
Yeah, I have a caveat here because overall, I'm probably looking to hold DJ Moore if I have him. I don't think you're selling for anything crazy. I don't think his production's going to fall off a cliff. He's a mid-range wide receiver 2 with these values. And the production I think he can give you is about in that range. So I don't feel like a huge compelling to go buy him because there's not much ceiling to the price I'm buying at. I don't think I'm getting like just an elite value picking up somebody who's a wide receiver 2. So if I have him, I'm happy holding. If I am looking to sell, however, I'd be looking to use him in a tier up as opposed to any kind of tier down or, splitting him into 2 assets, getting a second round pick next year plus a wideout. I don't think that's the move I'd make. I think I'd want to add, maybe if I'm really trying to push, maybe if DJ Moore was my wide receiver 2 last year and I need a little more pop at that position, I'd be more willing to add a first to DJ Moore to go get somebody in that top 12, and not that, can I use him somehow to get the Malik Neighbors who I'm just dying to get a piece of? Not that that's necessarily going to be a great fix for me to have a productive wide receiver this year because you don't want to trust rookies in your lineup that much. But Mike, what are you doing here? We are somewhat in agreement here overall.
I mean, I'm selling, but this to me is another sell high, obviously. And if I would hold if I'm competing or if I feel my team's going to compete or I'm not getting a good value for him. Wide receiver 6 last year, Bob. And here's the thing. I know target share is not everything, but he's got some target monster coming in, and Keenan Allen, guy's got a ton of targets in his career with the Chargers. And Romeo Doubs is in town as well. I think he's going to get a bunch of targets. Him and Caleb Williams are apparently best friends now. We got Cole Kmet there, and DeAndre Swift, who's been a good receiving back, except for last year in Philadelphia. Really don't throw to the backs a ton in Philadelphia. Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of targets to go around. I'm not seeing him being wide receiver 6 again. It's always possible. I don't want to say no, but I just feel like it's very unlikely. And in super flex league, Bob, you can get guys like DK Metcalf. He's valued around there. Kyron Williams, who his foot got hurt after I filled out the show sheet. Want to throw that out there. Mark Andrews, if you need a tight end. I know Nate would make that trade probably in a heartbeat. He's also valued around a mid first, like the 106 to 108. In a 1 quarterback league, Michael Pittman Jr., he should be the leading target receiver on the Colts. Nico Collins. Would you do Nico Collins or DJ Moore? Bob?
I'd rather have Nico personally, but I think these values are pretty darn close, especially with the addition of Stephon Diggs. Nico's taken somewhat of a hit. And to real quick wrap up this point, I think adding in not only the competition that he's set to face off with, but also having Caleb Williams there, a rookie quarterback who we like, but at the end of the day, we can expect some rookie hiccups and some rookie.
It always happens.
Yeah. Ups and downs. It's bound to happen. It's unlikely that he's going to come out and have a perfect season, especially when there's so many targets and then a rookie quarterback on top of it. And then the last thing I'll add too is just, I do think that somewhat the window to sell DJ high has passed because with the addition of Keenan Allen, with the addition of Romeo Doubs, I just don't think you're selling that high where, yes, I'd probably still prefer to get some of these other assets, but it's more of a strategy that we need to maybe talk about more on this channel is just moving your value somewhere else to somebody who's in a better situation that could do more for your team in the interim versus what DJ Moore might do this year. Michael Pittman is set up to be a great receiving option this year and somebody who's, albeit Anthony Richardson, I have question marks about. Everybody else knows that because I, ripped him a new one on the episode the other day. Go ahead and check that out if you want to. Either which way, I agree overall, Mike. Selling him is fine, but I think I'd prefer to sell him for a higher tiered. Maybe can I get from DJ Moore to Chris Olave that's a move I'd love to find a way to make. Is it a couple
Yeah.
seconds I have to throw on there? Is it a first I have to throw? Can I get a second round pick back? Something along those lines. I'd love to make
I
that.
feel like a DJ Moore in a second for Chris Olave feels pretty fair. If it's, if you haven't done your draft yet, it's like 202.
Sure. Oh, for sure. I
You
think
know
if
what I mean?
if it's that case, yeah. I think if you're throwing future seconds, maybe less appealing, but early second this year, I think definitely appealing for a lot of teams.
Let's talk about another youngish wide receiver. That's Devonta Smith of the Philadelphia Eagles. Keep trade cut, wide receiver 16, RADP, wide receiver 18. But Bob, what are you doing with Devonta Smith? A newly very, very wealthy Devonta Smith, by the way.
Hmm. Yeah, I am definitely interested in Devonta Smith. And even though I wasn't interested in DJ Moore, who is somebody who's similar valued, who I think is ultimately probably going to finish in the same realm of production, Devonta Smith's situation is a little bit different because he's the bona fide number two in that offense, and there's no competition for that number two role of targets. It's Devonta Smith role, and it should be a better offense under Kellen Moore this year. This offense has overall less mouths to feed, and Jalen Hurts at the helm, not a rookie as much as we like Caleb Williams, as I mentioned previously. I think their year-end finish might be pretty similar. Devonta, I'm kind of putting him around a wide receiver 10 to 14 finish, somewhere on that fringe of a wide receiver 1 and 2. And he'll definitely have some boom games mixed in. We saw it last year where he just had games where he was just incredible. I mean, putting up 20 plus points a week and, making it look easy out there. But he's also a bit younger than DJ Moore, which helps me a little bit with buying in. Whenever I'm buying in, I don't, if anybody's going to lose value anytime soon, I'm just not that interested. I think Devonta Smith is more likely to hold value. So for me, he's a buy / a hold. I'm willing to do it. I think you have to move a mid first round pick if or one of the rookies in that range,
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels, Drake May, one of the rookie wideouts. I don't know if I would move. It'd be tough for me to move Odunze or Malik Neighbors straight up for him, but maybe if there was some kind of pick swap in there or pick improvement in there, whatever the case is. In a one quarterback, that was a super flex cost. And one quarterback, you're looking at an early first that isn't Marvin Harrison. So those same wide receivers again. And maybe you get a pick back with Smith, maybe in a future season, probably not this year. I definitely wouldn't, sell Marvin Harrison for Smith unless I was getting a pretty significant kickback.
Man, I'm going to hold him. Like I said, sign that contract extension. He's not going anywhere. Him and AJ Brown, look, that's a good wide receiver duo. And I think part of the flaws in a lot of fantasy players is we always want the number one option in a receiving offense. I get it. I really do. But there's a lot of times where the number two option is very good as well. Devonta Smith is one of them. T. Higgins, we can make the case for him for a few years. But, when it's him, Jamar Chase, Jaylen Waddle is another good example of that. But look, he's the number two option. Like I said, Kellen Moore, that offense, it's going to have something that the Eagles offense didn't have last year. Motion. Oh my goodness. I can't wait. He's missed one game in 3 seasons, so he's very reliable. He goes out there, even for a slim build, he plays through pretty much everything. He averaged 14.2 fantasy points per game last year, 15 the year before, and that's coming up from his rookie season where he had 10.9 fantasy points per game. If anything, he's consistent. He's steady. You put him in there. If Devonta Smith is your wide receiver 2, you're looking okay. And if somehow he's your wide receiver 3, talk to me.
That's where I want him.
I want to see what your roster looked like if he's your wide receiver 3. So I'm holding, and if I could buy him affordably, which I don't think I can, I would buy him too. But the values you gave me, probably too rich for my looks. I'm cheap.
Yeah, I think he's probably a little bit more accessible than you think, more than he should be. Because at the end of the day, you touched on it with the concept of hating on a really good wide receiver 2 on a team. And, I think him and Jaylen Waddle, Devonta Smith and Jaylen Waddle are ahead of that T. Higgins grouping. But at the end of the day, the points he's putting in your lineup as a really, really good wide receiver 3, which is where I'd want to have him on my roster, I'm A-okay with that. I feel so good about having that locked into my wide receiver 3 hole, I guess you could say, or flex 1 if you only have 2 starting wide receivers, whatever the case is. But I like buying in. I want to buy in. I don't think I have him anywhere at this point, so I want to go get him, though.
Well, let's move on to the state of Tennessee, and let's talk about Calvin Ridley. Keep trade cut. He's wide receiver 48, Dynasty Run ADP. He's wide receiver 44. Bob, it looks like you and I got some brainwaves going on here. Talk to me. What do you got?
Yeah, I am 100% avoiding Calvin Ridley. Admittedly, I'm not really interested in this offense because I'm not a Will Levis believer. But at the end of the day, I can acknowledge there's probably some value to be had if you're willing to, play a little risky because there's ambiguity. I cannot say that word, ambiguity.
Ambiguity, I believe, is how it's said,
Man,
but I feel
that
like I
that
butchered it as I said it.
that snuck up on me. The ambiguousness of the the offense. It's just not for me. I'm not a Levis believer, like I said, and I'm not, really in on the idea of being Ridley being anything more than the wide receiver 2 in this offense. Not that's a bad thing. I just rather target somebody like Deontay Johnson, set up to be a top wide receiver with a better quarterback in the Canales offense that has thrived with Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield at quarterback. And that only costs you a mid-second round pick this year, maybe a 25-second straight up. If you have Quentin Johnson kicking around from last year, you can throw him into a discussion, throw a third on top of it if you have to. These values are pretty similar in a one quarterback as well as super flex, so not a ton of disparity there. But I just rather look elsewhere than go after Calvin Ridley. But I think you're in the similar value vein with Deontay Johnson. Still nobody wants to talk about him despite probably being the wide receiver 1 in that offense going forward. Mike, you're avoiding as well. Why is that?
Who would you thinking that Tennessee's number 1 wide receiver? Are you saying D-Hop is their number 1?
Yeah, until he's not, he is.
Yeah,
For me.
that's a good point. And I'm curious to see how Tennessee looks this year. And the thing is, the problem with their offense is if you don't buy in now, it's going to be too late. But
right,
it might be one of those things where you just have to look elsewhere. I'm not out on Levis, but I'm not in on Levis either.
Yeah.
I'm curiously optimistic to see, like, hey, if I could get him in some cases like a mid-second, I'll get you Will Levis. If he's my quarterback 4 and I could let him chill, and if he turns into something, great. But I still don't know what it's going to look like. What's up?
Here's the thing with buying in now. The problem with buying in now, and you think of missing the boat, is their future wide receiver 1 is not on this team. It's in the draft. It's somebody they pick up via a trade, something along these lines. If you're missing out on D-Hop, Calvin Ridley, at worst, you're not missing out for long. If you miss out, you miss out. But I don't think I'm not willing to buy in on any of this offense right now. Have your values. This is just not one for me at this point. So, Mike, sorry I cut you off.
No, it's fine. And look, he averaged 13.5 fantasy points per game in a better offense last year with a better quarterback. He's downgrading both at quarterback. I don't know exactly what this offense is going to look like. We know what Doug Peterson's offense looked like in Jacksonville. And like you said before, this room is oddly crowded now. DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd is there, Treylon Burks, Kyle Phillips still kicking around too for all you Kyle Phillips fans out there. He's going to be 30 at the end of the season, and he hasn't been the most consistent producer over his career. I could go after guys like DK Metcalf, who was wide receiver 21 last year. What really was wide receiver 18, but I think that DK Metcalf with Geno Smith healthy this year, and Metcalf averages 14.1 fantasy points per game. In Superflex, you could get like trade T. Higgins for Metcalf in a second. You can move Kenneth Walker the third, TJ Hawkinson for Metcalf plus a late first, stuff like that. You could move Zay Flowers in a 1 quarterback league too, or a mid first for DK Metcalf if you want a consistent proven production. Bob, you and I are about to completely disagree for the first time in this pod, but I do have caveats to mine, and I will get there. Davante Adams, former Green Bay Packer. Keep trade cut wide receiver 34. Our ADP is wide receiver 33. And again, we'd love to see you contribute to that ADP. Patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Check out the chat for a week for free.
So I'm avoiding Davante Adams as much as I respect what he's done as a Packer and the incredible career he's had. That's not up for debate here. But we talked about it a little bit earlier where I'm just not really interested on buying in what is surely to be a declining asset at this point. And, the cliff is coming, and that's evidenced by he's going to be 32 years old by the year's end. Last year was his 4th season in a row declining in fantasy points per game, 25.6, 21.5, 19.7, and 15.6 last year. These are all still very good, by the way. These are not, this is declining numbers, but still putting up wide receiver 2 numbers at worst. So it's not, but we know that at the end of the day, the cliff comes hard and it comes quick. With aging wideouts. And 2, this comes with a caveat as well. While I don't want to buy in now, I may be more in with several of these guys. These can change in season depending on my year goes, whatever the case is. situations are situational, things can change. I don't want to buy it now, but I may be more interested later in the season if he's doing well and I need a little bit to make a push to get to the playoffs, whatever the case is. And maybe I can get him from a team that's not looking to contend anymore because their season didn't go as planned. I might be able to get him a little cheaper then, as opposed to what I might have to pay now. Team wanting to get out for something as opposed to, hey, the cliff's coming. What can we do about it? But a player I'd rather target here, Terry McLaurin. I may be losing out on some pop here with what I expect to be a quarterback upgrade, despite my concerns in Jane Daniels overall. Terry McLaurin is 2 years younger and could be a part of my lineup a good bit longer. He's only scored between 12.3 points per game and 14.9 points per game throughout his entire career, but he's never been below that either. So he has a nice floor. He comes with a nice floor. And he's pretty affordable, late second, pair of thirds, or some trades I saw on Fantasy Calc. Great place to go check up some values if you're interested in that. Also, one quarterback mid-second, 25 seconds straight up. I'd be surprised if it costs you more than that, let alone that, because I just don't think anybody's real excited about Terry McLaurin anymore. I think he's just one of those guys. He's a super discount, and I mean super discount, like Walmart brand, maybe your local dollar store brand, Mike Evans, where he's putting up decent points every year, but not super sexy points by any stretch of the imagination. But so, Mike, you're doing something else. What do you got here?
It sounds weird. Why avoid Calvin Ridley? Why buy Davante Adams? But that's what I'm doing. The caveat here is if I'm in need of a wide receiver 3, okay, that I think I can put into my, a lot of leagues, they have multiple wide receivers, 3, 4 flex spots. Obviously, Davante Adams is a good bet. And I feel like I am pushing for a championship. I think he's safe. This guy who hasn't missed a lot of time, he was pretty good with Aiden O'Connell, who I saw was getting first team reps in OTAs, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
You did see that as well. I wasn't
Yep.
just delirious from working 12-hour days at work. And if not, look, Gardner Minshew, look what he did last year with Michael Pittman Jr. He could do the same thing with Davante Adams. And again, to be clear, I'm buying him in a win now scenario. I feel like my team is locked and loaded. I just need that one little extra security blanket piece. 103 catches last year, 1,144 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Not bad for a team that was rolling with a late round pick. And hey, some people don't like Terry McLaurin, Bob. We can make a deal. I give you Scary Terry. I will go ahead and I will take Davante Adams. And in Superflex, he's valued again around guys like Will Levis, a mid-second in one quarterback league, an early second, Trevor Lawrence, and DeAndre Swift. Interesting. Let's talk about Josh Downs. Bob, this is your boy. He's been your boy.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to stay your boy till he retires.
Yeah.
Keep track out wide receiver 54. The Dynasty Rewind likes him a little bit more than consensus. Wide receiver 41. Bob, what are you doing?
I wonder whose fault that is, that he's ticking along still at wide receiver 44. All Keep Trade Cut has him so low.
Thought.
couldn't be me. But honestly, I think a good bit of his fall has been just before even the drafting of Adonai Mitchell. I don't think the drafting of Adonai Mitchell is the end for Josh Downs by any stretch. I just am not an Adonai believer. But I think people were kind of hating on Josh Downs even before then with, a not awesome rookie year, despite having 94 targets and an 18% target share, which is nothing to scoff at. He was looked at, and he missed some time. He was a little banged up here and there. But at the end of the day, Downs is still a gifted route runner and a polished wide receiver. And everyone tells me that Anthony Richardson is, quote, going to be a stud, unquote, which has nothing to do with him being overvalued, but that's a discussion for 2 days ago. At this cost, though, I'm grabbing him any chance I can get to be a rotational flex play with some upside. You can get him for as little as a 3rd round pick these days, which is just mind boggling to me. You can flip him for, if you just don't want one of the wide receivers that are going in the late second of drafts, or, some of the other wide receiver or players that are kicking around in the late second of drafts that we'll talk about in another upcoming episode, Mike. You can flip one of those picks. Maybe some people are drafting a little more wisely and sending some players we like less to the back of the second round. I'm still in on Josh Downs. I'm not out. And at the end of the day, too, to spoil your holding, you're not selling him for anything special at this point. The ship is not sinking enough to where you're getting anything great for him. But Mike, not to spoil more of your point, what do you got?
Well, I'm holding, as Bob alluded to, and I think a lot of people were kind of thrown off about Josh Downs when A.D. Mitchell was drafted. different positions. AD Mitchell is more of a detriment to Alec Pierce than he is Josh Downs. Josh Downs is starting slot wide receiver, which is exactly where I want him. He's going to be Anthony Richardson's number 2 target. I don't see a lot in the tight end department here.
No,
I see a lot of yuckies in the tight end department. And, Bob, you alluded to the fact that a lot of people were disappointed with his rookie season fantasy wise. 68 catches for 771 yards and 2 touchdowns, playing with the team's backup quarterback. I don't
know what more you could expect.
Really, what more do you want from this guy? The problem is when this is something fantasy analysts and players have their blinders on. We like a guy, he gets drafted to a good spot. He needs to explode or he sucks. That's not always how it works. He had a great season. Michael Pittman Jr. is the number 1. He's the alpha wide receiver there. I'm holding. He's not going anywhere because, like you said, Bob, can't really sell him for as much as you'd like to right now. Let's move on. We're quasi in agreement here. Let's talk about Detroit Lions wide receiver Jameson Williams. Keep trade cut wide receiver 49. Our Dynasty Rewind ADP. Again, would love to see you guys contribute to it. He's wide receiver 51. So a little bit of parity right there. Bob, what are you doing?
This is a big ol' fat sell for me because I, always with these, I want to see what players are going for on the open market. I go to Fantasy Calc. I don't actually have any Jameson Williams kicking around because I avoided him throughout his draft process or through the draft that he was in. Never decided to buy low or buy back in on him when opportunities arose. But if you have Jameson Williams and you can get a second-round pick for the guy, I implore you to sell him. He is set to be the 4th receiving option in this offense behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, and Jahmyr Gibbs. Yes, behind a running back. He's set to be the deep threat, and that will lead to some big plays and some touchdowns. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, these are not going to be points you can rely on setting a lineup, especially in smaller starting formats. You're not going to have, if it's a start 11, whatever, hold on to him because he's somebody that you could put in a flex. He'll blow up one week and, possibly give you a good week. Other weeks, he might be a total detriment. But either which way, if you're trying to plug this guy into a start 8 or 9 lineup, you're never going to win the roulette game of when he's popping off. People are still paying a second-round pick. Go get a second-round pick for this guy while you still can, because once it shows that he's the 4th receiving option, like he was actually the 5th receiving option on this team last year. I know he missed some games due to his suspension, but even on a per-game basis, he was 5th behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, and you guessed it, good old Josh Reynolds. He was behind even in that pecking order. So just get off him while you can. I can't do it. You're not going to be able to get much more for him much longer, in my opinion. So, Mike, what are you doing here?
Let's not forget this team likes Cleve Raymond too, who got 44 targets last year in this exact same offense. I'm going to go ahead and avoid. I can't sell because I've sold all my shares already, Bob. It's just how it goes. The production has not been what we expected. And I know he was injured coming into his first season. He had the suspension, but for his career, Bob, 25 catches for 395 yards and 3 touchdowns. This is a guy who was like a mid to late first-round pick in a lot of rookie drafts, depending on the format. It's not good. And at best, he's the 3rd target. But why would you throw it to Jameson Williams when you could throw it to Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs, like you said? And look, David Montgomery, he's caught a few passes here and there as well. So these guys can do it. I'd rather go for a guy like Chris Godwin. People love to hate Chris Godwin, but, you could move players like David Njoku or Mondre Stevenson a mid-second in a Superflex league to get Chris Godwin. And in one quarterback league, you can move Tua, Hollywood Brown, getting that Chiefs bump in an early second. I'll move Hollywood for Chris Godwin gladly.
Sure.
Now, Bob, I think this last exercise here you did just to torture me, or you were just trying to put your Green Bay Packers fandom to the test. I don't know.
No, I would
combination of both. But we're going to do buy one, sell one, hold one, avoid one, Green Bay Packers edition. To name the wide receivers we're talking about, we got Jayden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs, and Christian Watson. Let's start it off with the favorite, Jayden Reed. Bob?
Yeah, for me, this whole process, another reason to get in the Discord. Every week we've been asking, hey, what do you want us to talk about on these podcasts? And you give us a list of players. The Green Bay wide receiver room has been a huge talking point, always wondering, hey, what are you doing with this room? If you have any of them, or if you don't have any of them, do you want to buy in, etc. But for Jayden Reed, getting into the first one, I'm absolutely holding if I have him. He's the most expensive piece in the group. Don't really feel like buying him. Some people admittedly are selling low. So I'd be willing to go buy in those cases. But also the one who I think is locked in either way to be a big part of this offense, even if he isn't the wide receiver one on the team, I think he ends up the wide receiver 1 or 2, which to Jordan Love in this offense is still going to be valuable. So he's a big hold for me. I like everything but selling or avoiding Jayden Reed at this point.
And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to buy him. I don't know why people are really big Dontavian Wicks fans right now.
I'm a Dontavian Wicks fan, Mike. Watch out.
No, I like Dontavian Wicks, and where you drafted him in your rookie drafts, he's definitely improved on his value. I just feel like the things that people are saying about him, it's like, let's pump the brakes a little on Dontavian Wicks here, because I think Jayden Reed will be the de facto wide receiver 1 for this team by the end of the season. Look at that ADOT 10.0, and that yak rack is 5.4. You play inside and outside too. And if I'm buying, I would love to try for an early second. It's not going to get it done. I'd pay up to the 111 plus if I had to sprinkle in a little bit, or some sort of value player. I would gladly do that. Do staggered seconds if somebody would go for it. You can move Isaiah Pacheco, George Pickens, similarly valued to Jayden Reed right now. So let's move on to the next one. Dontavian Wicks. Somehow he figured out how to catch the ball between playing at Virginia and getting drafted by the Green Bay Packers. Bob, what are you doing?
I am going to go ahead and buy Dontavian Wicks because he's the cheapest to acquire, more than likely, who's shown some really nice flashes. And now, if you flash back to his college career, I think he's one of the guys that's kind of slipped through the cracks because of very odd production, odd seasons. He skipped his sophomore season due to COVID. But you look at his junior season in 2021, incredible year, 1,201 receiving yards, 93 targets, 9 touchdowns. To go along with that, he averaged an incredible 3.25 yards per route run and 21.1 yards per reception. And Mike, 5 yak wreck to boot. Then he did play his full senior season. He did have some injury as well. But he also had god-awful quarterback play that was not as bad in 2021 as it was in 2022. Brennan Armstrong, a name you'll never hear again, in 2022, 53.8%, which was completion percentage, which was 80th out of 82 qualifying quarterbacks with over 300 and some dropbacks. Adjusted completion percentage for throwaways and drops was 66.5%, which was 76th out of 82. More like arm weak, am I right? As opposed to Armstrong. But fun fact there, Anthony Richardson was dead last, 82nd in adjusted completion percentage in 2022. It's a fun fact for you. There was drops as well. You alluded to not being able to catch the ball, but those weren't as much of an issue in 2021 as it was in 2022. So kind of a one-year fluke, if you ask me. Watch out, desk. Shouldn't cost more than a third. If you have to send a second, you're probably getting a third-round pick back as well. So you're not losing a lot trying to buy in on this guy, in my opinion. And I think he's got a ton of upside at the end of the day. I think, showed some really nice things in college, but like I said, one of those guys that kind of slipped through the cracks because of some odd circumstances, to say the least. But Mike, what are you doing with Dontavian Wicks?
But I would say to Dontavian Wicks' face, I'm holding you, my friend. Last year, did have a 67.2% catch rate. That's great. Decent ADOT and yak rec, 10.7 for the ADOT, 5.3 for the yak rec, and a 42.9% contested catch percentage. That's really good. That was better than Jayden Reed's contested catch percentage, by the way. I forgot to put it on the sheet, but I believe it was 25.2, if I remember correctly. Romeo Doubs. Looks like we're in agreement, Bob. We're both just dumping him, getting rid of him. Process elimination, right?
Exactly. This is what it boiled down to. This was the one player who I just felt the least about, even though he showed up in an incredible way in the playoffs. I mean, and that's what, if it weren't for him doing that, it'd make him the easy sell. But it's like, wow, he showed up in the playoffs and he was absolutely incredible. What do you do now? But in my opinion, I think this guy gives you the most return, possibly has the least upside, the most we've seen out of a wideout so far, arguably has shown some flashes as well. But, I could almost interchange Doubs and maybe Wicks, there's a myriad of ways that you could put this together and it would all make sense. But he's a sell for me right now. I think you can get a third, maybe a late second for the guy at this point. Maybe you add a third onto Doubs, go get a second in return for the guy.
He's kind of like the old news of the wide receiver group, we could say, right? Does that make sense? I mean, kind of the forgotten man. And if his value right now, this trade actually happened. Romeo straight up for Deontay Johnson.
Love it. Give me Deontay.
Deontay there. Brian Robinson. if you need a running back. I do think that Austin Eckler does not pose as much of a threat. Here's one that I saw as well. I like this trade a lot. Doubs in a 25 third for Amari Cooper. I like that one. I think Amari Cooper's going to have a pretty decent year. Let's talk about the last Green Bay Packers wide receiver, Christian Watson.
Definitely an avoid for me. And I just, until he gets his hamstrings figured out,
Yeah.
you know, he has been an absolute lightning rod for production when he's healthy, but strikes about as often as lightning does when he is healthy. These hamstrings just do not keep up, and he's seeing a specialist. Things are apparently going well. If I was guaranteed that Christian Watson was going to play 17 games, he'd probably be the wide receiver one on this team for me if I knew that. But you know, when he's missing time playing games, he's missing out on development. He's already missed 2 years of development. He was kind of raw coming out of college. He was coming from a quote unquote small school, not playing, you know, with like SEC or anything like that. Obviously not necessarily a small school, but you get the picture. Not great production. You know, Christian Watson's fast and all this other stuff, but I just am not a huge fan, so I'm going to avoid.
I'm going to avoid as well. And one of my least favorite things to hear in fantasy football, Bob, is something you just said: when he's healthy. Because when you have to say when he's healthy about a player, it tells me I got to avoid him, because the best ability is availability and also scoring fantasy points. And you're right, he is a lightning rod for production. So can Jameson Williams be too, but I'm avoiding him as well. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to avoid Christian Watson. And he did miss 8 games last year. From what I counted on Player Profiler, with these hamstring issues, it's almost half the season. So not great, but that's okay. The good thing about that is it gave these other guys time to flourish and learn how to be better wide receivers. So detriment to him, positive for everybody else.